I do
Yeah,
what I want.
let's go live. Let's go live. Yeah, I'm harassing one of my guests. Yes. Welcome to the Lovecraft eZine podcast. I hope everyone is having a good day. We have two guests today. Malcolm Devlin. Hey, Malcolm, how are you?
I'm very well, thanks.
And our old friend Stephen Mark Rainey. So,
greetings.
Old in the
live long and perspire.
Yeah, old in the sense that we've known you a long time, not that you're old.
You say that now.
Yeah, now that I'm on air, yeah. So, Pete is on his way in, and I'm not sure who else. I know that DeBronzo, I think his kids are sick, and Ben's something happened to, I think Ben, his kid's arm got sprained or something, he said. So anyway, sorry, doing two things at once. All right, thanks guys for letting me know that you can hear us. So welcome to the Lovecraft eZine podcast. Let's do introductions. I'm sure Matt's on his way with the prize, but maybe not. I think he's out of town. Anyway, I'm Mike Davis, Lovecraft eZine. Bridget, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hello, I'm Bridget, and as it says on my tag, I'm the final girl, composer, artist, horror fan. Hello, everyone.
And Rick.
I'm Rick Lay, writer and pulp magazine collector.
Malcolm, you want to give us a short introduction, and then we'll talk to you some more?
Sure. I'm Malcolm Devlin. I've written a short novella called "And Then I Woke Up," and I've got a couple of short stories collections which are out in the UK as well.
All right, and Stephen Mark Rainey. Mark Rainey.
Hey, I have recently written and released Fugue Devil from Black Raven Books. It's a collection of my short stories from 30 some years, some of which are previously published, some of which are new. And Fugue Devil was a novelette I wrote in 1991, I believe, and was originally published in 1992. So this is sort of a 30th anniversary edition of the book, and it has the sequel to Fugue Devil called The Devil's Eye, and what a story called Threnody, a very Lovecraftian tale called Threnody, which indirectly sets up what happens in Fugue Devil. And there's 9-10 other tales, some of which are tangentially related and some of which are just completely standalone. And like I said, that's now out from Black Raven Books.
Well, hell, we don't have to interview you now.
Okay, there it is. I'm off. I'm gonna go drink, and
you can drink on the show. So Malcolm, you wrote a book called "And Then I Woke Up," which is what we're here mainly to talk about. It's a novella which was published by Tor, right?
Yes.
One that Ellen Datlow picked up.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah, because she had emailed me initially about getting you on the show.
Yes, I saw that.
To talk about the book.
She was going through her address book.
What's that?
I think she was going through her address book.
Actually, I think I've had Ellen as a guest on the show more than any one person over the years. So, so anyway, this is going to be a little bit tough because it's a novella and it's actually pretty deep with twists and turns, and has a lot to say about society, belief, narratives, and so forth. Things that I can't get into too deeply without ruining the surprises in the book. But could you kind of give us a spoiler-free synopsis? Where the protagonist is at the beginning and kind of what he's facing.
Yeah, sure. It's a bit of a tricky one because
Yeah.
it's a sort of twist which kind of comes about a third of the way in, I think.
Yeah.
But it sort of reshapes how it's supposed to appear. But it's nice, I suppose, if you can read it without that in advance. But it's about a man who's living in an institution and he's ostensibly cured from the effects of a worldwide pandemic, no relation to the current one. Pandemic may have affected the way people, the infected, perceive reality, or it might have involved a zombie apocalypse. Either way, he's cured, and a new inmate comes up to him with the kind of, he gives him an opportunity to get out and get back into the world again.
Well, that was one of the first things I wanted to ask you. This is June 2022. Of course, our real world pandemic started somewhere around March 2020,
Yeah.
or at least got really bad that month. When were you writing this book? Before, during? Were you inspired by the pandemic, or was this already written?
No, this was mostly written in 2019, and I'd sent it to, I think I sent it to Ellen early 2020, and I think we just got confirmation back from Tor after the pandemic had started hitting, and of course during that gap I was thinking, oh, no one's going to want this. This is the worst kind of coincidence. But no, they picked it up anyway. But it's completely unrelated to this. But it's weird that, I mean, I was sort of setting it generally around where I was living at the time, and a lot of people sort of walking off around sort of deserted cities, which ended up being quite familiar by the end of it. It was interesting sort of going through the different revisions as well, because every time I sort of went through it, I thought, oh, okay, I can tweak that, so it becomes a bit more convincing pandemic, I suppose, now. But no, the main thing was all written beforehand. It wasn't, there was no connection between this and COVID.
Well, you know, Paul Tremblay said the same thing about Cabin at the End of the World, and actually, I remember when this started a couple of years ago, seeing that a lot of people were watching pandemic movies and things like that on Netflix and whatnot. And me personally, that I just couldn't get into that, but it seemed like a lot of people were. And I don't know why that is. My guess would be, you know, it's a real world fear. It's happened, or a version of it's happened. Yeah. And, you know, of course, in the movie or the story or whatever, it gets vanquished. You know, the one with Dustin Hoffman, I can't remember the name of that one, that kind of thing. So I guess it can be comforting in that way.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think it's always been a possibility. There's been pandemic fiction for, you know, as long as we've been fictionally, hasn't there?
Yeah.
So it's easy to go, oh, these novels predicted this, that, and the other, but I think that's all complete nonsense. You're just picking up similar tropes. So
yeah. So I want to read a few of the blurbs here. You got a lot of nice comments about the book. Stephen Graham Jones says that, by the way, the name of the book is "And Then I Woke Up" by Malcolm Devlin, Devlin, and I do link to it in the show notes as always. But for example, Stephen Graham Jones says, "A scathing portrait of the world we live in, and a running commentary on what's story, what's truth, and what's not." Alma Katsu, I don't know if I'm saying her name correctly, but I think we all know who she is, says, "The perfect story for the maddening times we find ourselves in. For every time we've said of a loved one who's gone astray, dear God, why can't they just wake up?" You know, and a lot of quotes like that. And like I said, this is a hard book to talk about without getting into spoilers, but it's got a lot to say about why people believe the things that they believe. And, you know, one of the things, a book I really like, if I've got it on Kindle, then I get to do a lot of highlighting. And for example, here's something from "And Then I Woke Up." "Given the choice, the pleasantly told lie is always more seductive. That's why religion is so potent," she said, "why history and science are still considered up for debate. Myth is more appealing than verified truth because of the gray areas between the facts can still be used against us. And there's another quote later on in the book that I don't have in front of me, but you write that someone who's been released from the effects of this pandemic, I'll put it in those terms in the book, actually makes a statement, you know, I wish I still was affected, or I wish I still had the certainty of believing this. And I think that's why, you know, for example, religious cults or extremism of any kind, whether it's political or religious or whatnot, is appealing to some people because it offers absolute certainty. So it, you know, seems like to me that's part of what your book is trying to say. Is that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, so I wasn't writing it at the time of the pandemic, but I was writing it post. I mean, I'm from the UK, so I was writing it post Brexit and post Trump and stuff like that. And so this whole kind of rise of fake news, which I thought was quite interesting,
Right.
Also terrifying. But so the idea of it was my working title for it was the Brexit zombie novel for a bit, but obviously pitched that, which is good. But this whole idea that the sort of complete nonsense was being peddled and then believed and then used against anything else. I mean, it's still prevalent around sort of current discourse, I suppose. So that's largely where that was coming from. I mean, it's not a particularly subtle book.
No. Yeah. An Amazon reviewer wrote, "It's so hard to talk about, and then I woke up without giving spoilers, and I definitely don't want to mess up that first glorious read for anyone." I definitely wanted to quote this for anyone who's on the fence about buying and reading this book. Please don't be. First of all, if you got a Kindle, it's only $3.99, and it's a really, really great read. But to continue that blurb, the "oh, that's what's happening" moment in this book was one of the best reveals I've experienced in a long time. I don't know if you saw that quote yet, Malcolm, but
no, I haven't.
That's pretty high praise. And
that's lovely.
Yeah, I completely agree. You know, after reading it.
Thanks for that. I must have been kind of living under a rock, hiding under a rock, shall we say, since it came out, because it seems a bit terrifying.
Well, Ellen Datlow made me read it, and then I was glad she did.
Good old Ellen.
She didn't make me read it. She suggested that I read it and gave me a copy, and I was very glad that she did so.
I'll say no to Ellen.
Now, I've said this on the show before too, but Stephen King's story, The Mist, begins with 4 words, and I think I've mentioned this at least half a dozen times on this show over the past few years. And those words are, "This is what happened," which is, you know, I've remarked in the past before I read your book, it's basically the narrator saying, okay, some really fucked up stuff happened. And look, all I can do is tell you this is what happened and start from there. And in the book, this isn't really a spoiler, but in the book, you begin saying, this is what happened. And then it starts coming in at increasing frequency throughout the book. And then it moves to, this is what they said happened. And then later on, this might be what happened, things like that. So was that deliberate? Did you have The Mist in mind? There were those 4 words. That's a powerful beginning. But the way that you turn that around is really brilliant.
Thank you. It completely slipped my mind actually that The Mist begins, because I really like that novella, obviously, but it's as through the editing process, I sort of added in a few more of those. Originally, it was all, this is what happened all the way through, and I think it's one particular section, then it sort of starts getting a bit hazy. But the idea of being that's starting a bit hazy, it means you sort of trust it less when it comes up further down.
Yeah.
Further on. So it was partly originally in the manuscript and partly sort of adapted as we sort of went along. So that was some Velen's input as well.
Well, you know, he doesn't have a copyright on those 4 words, but it's just,
Which is good. Completely.
yeah, probably. But, you know, I guess all I can say is, even if you had been aware, you really turn it around in a really unique way, that just because something happened doesn't mean this person believes it happened this way, or this person believes it happened this way. You know, that's exactly why eyewitness testimony is not admissible in court, at least in the United States. I don't know about other countries, because it's the worst kind of evidence there is.
Yeah.
What inspired you to write this particular book? What was the genesis of the ideas in this book?
Well, again, this might sort of creep a little bit close to spoiler territory. So there's a couple of things. I mean, partly is I quite like zombie stories, but there is a tendency. I was noticing because tendency in some zombie films and stories that I was seeing for them to be tend to edge into survival fantasies. The idea that this all became about, now we have an excuse to basically mow down people, and that's fine. We just have a universal villain that it's all right to just blow up and what have you. But I've always felt that zombie stories started off as stories about betrayal, where there's something that could happen to anybody, and then if it happened to you, then basically you would put the people you love in danger. And I think that's betrayal is always a very interesting sort of engine for horror stories. And I was starting to feel that an awful lot of these sort of zombie stories were turning into survival fantasies, where it's more about what guns and sort of survival equipment you could stack up in order to outlive the zombie hordes, rather than thinking about, these used to be people who you loved, for example, who now want to eat you, which makes it worse, surely. The idea that being sort of seen as the horde coming towards you as just a big sort of faceless blob of people that was allowed to kill sort of made you think of things like the film Zulu, for example, the British Empire mowing down Zulu warriors who are basically treated as a zombie horde. So I was thinking about that in one terms, but the other was watching.
Excuse me, I think you might be hitting your mic a little bit when you talk. So.
Oh, mic's over here.
Okay. Anyway, yep, go on.
The other was watching, I can't remember what it was. It wasn't The Walking Dead, but it was some TV series featuring zombies. And I've always had a suspicion that zombie stories, like ghost stories, work best in the short form. And I think that the longer they go, it just becomes, and then this happens, and then this, it's just another.
Yeah.
It's just a series of like, oh, and then they attack again, and then they attack again. And we're just waiting time until we get another attack and another set piece. Whereas I always feel that zombie stories really should be sort of closing, sort of it's by the end of everything rather than stuff continuing.
Well,
and this is
I'm sorry, please.
This was a zombie story, which was the one I was watching was just going on and on and on, and I just wondered if maybe wouldn't it be interesting if in the final series they thought, and the big twist at the end of the series was, and then they all woke up. Which is the worst twist. But I thought that would be interesting if they did that, and would that actually make things worse? So that's kind of where I was coming from, I guess.
It's also really well written. There's a sentence in there that I'm trying to find it right now as I talk, but oh yeah, here it is. It was a Saturday when the world finally broke. I love that. What's your view? Do you think this is just something in the human condition that you wanted to help point out, or what? I don't quite know how to say this. This willingness to follow someone who's promising absolute certainty in their, instead of trying to find out, follow the evidence and so forth. Does that make sense?
Sorry, how do you mean in terms of?
Well, I mean, what are your thoughts on it? Do you think most humans have this problem, or just some do and the rest just follow? Does that make sense? Follow.
Yeah, I think everybody is probably susceptible to it.
Yeah.
I think you sort of see these sort of convictions of narratives, the idea of sort of falling into narrative traps, if you like, believing one thing above all else. I think you sort of see that all over the spectrum. I think it's some instances are obviously more prevalent than others. I mean, right now, I mean, there's a whole sort of like COVID denialism, for example, the sort of strange obsession, the idea that if you wear masks, it makes things worse or something like that. I don't understand. Immigration narratives and so on. The idea that people coming in make things more troubling for others. I mean, Fox News seem to come up with new mad narratives each day, and people clearly believe them. I think there's some of that on the other side as well. I think the whole no one is talking about this narrative you get on Twitter, I think sometimes it's a thing which is used in order to try and get people to focus on something, but it's not necessarily a true thing, for example. So I think that everybody's sort of is susceptible to sort of falling into this is the story and this is what we should follow at one point. I think maybe social media makes it easier to do that because you end up in these bubbles. But so I think there's. Does that answer the question? Or am I just rambling now?
No. Yeah. You get into these echo chambers. It's easy to do, and
yes, confirmation biases.
Exactly. Took the words right out of my mouth. Yeah. And the other thing, and I was stammering a few minutes ago because it's such a good book, but as the Amazon reviewer said, it's so hard to talk about without spoiling it. You almost need to have. You can't have a really decent conversation about, and then I woke up unless you're talking to people who have read it. And then there's lots and lots of things to talk about because you don't have to worry about spoilers. I will say this. I am so sick of zombie stories. I've said this before on the show. I'm so sick of zombie books, movies, TV series. And so when I say that I greatly enjoyed this zombie novella, I hope that says without any spoilers that people should pick it up and read it because it's absolutely worth reading.
Thank you very much.
Who are some of your influences? Who, younger, who did you read? Who were you influenced by?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I read lots. So I read sort of, I like sort of various sort of genre sort of areas. I think when I was a kid, sort of reading stuff like M.R. James, Algernon Blackwood and stuff like that. And then getting older, sort of picking up Robert Aikman's stuff and sort of going all through those. More recently,
there's a lot of ambiguity with those guys too. A lot of their stories.
Yeah, which I really like. I think that there was something came up the other day with a story. It's an adaptation of an M.R. James story that I saw on television, and for some reason they decided to give it a concrete ending, and it made me think that I think the line "and they were never seen again" is far more frightening than "and then the monster got them."
Yeah,
we just end up with so many stories where it's like, "Oh, the monster turned up and they get killed." It's like, "Oh, okay." Right. So yeah, I like it when it's sort of the ... I think rather than the just close the chapter.
I agree, and certainly ambiguity can be done very badly, where you're like screaming,
yes.
"Is that it?"
Yeah.
But done properly, it's very satisfying.
Yeah. More recently, Nathan Bowningwood, his stuff is fantastic. Obviously, I mean, and also his first collection had an awful lot of weird ambiguity going on that as well. Helen Marshall. Obviously, more recently, I read The Wake by Elizabeth. Just Wake by Elizabeth Knox, which is not ambiguous at all, but it's really horrible, which is nice. All kinds of stuff. Usman Malik.
You read? Are you pretty eclectic reader? Have you always been like you said, different genres, not just horror?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. What about TV shows, movies that you've been watching? What are some of your favorites right now?
We just finished watching Severance on Apple TV, which was great
Oh
fun.
yeah.
And that has some nice.
I've seen about half of that. I haven't gotten all the way
It's
through
worth
yet.
sticking with. It's cleverly done. They've seeded in things from the end at the beginning in a way that it sort of just discombobulates as it goes on. And I really like the way they did that. Other than that, what else have we been watching? God, partway through the new series of Stranger Things, but it feels like it's dragging on a bit. I don't know. I think of it.
Thank you. I agree.
I feel they should have cleared the decks a little bit before they carried on with this one. And it might have.
I was like, oh my God, those 11 flashbacks are killing me. I mean,
it's when they have flashbacks in an episode from the previous episode, and they have a lot of flashbacks.
right. I
like,
kept finding myself thinking, wait, this isn't happening now, right? So yeah. You got Pete. Hi. Pete made it.
Yes, they made it.
You agree? Because I think you disagreed with me last time.
No. So I wish that they had just I got the attempt at storytelling. It was an attempt to slowly reveal that 11 wasn't the cause of things, that it was this other character, and this other character is the big bad.
But who of us could ever think that 11 was,
But it was done poorly.
It was such an obvious trick.
And in many ways, it reminds me of like when Marvel decides, it was like to reboot things. It's like, oh yeah, this character, you thought they were bad, but they're really good. And this character that's good, they're now really bad. And and it redefines the characters. It's just, and one of the things that the first 3 seasons did was, whether she did it on purpose or not, 11 carried the guilt of opening the gate to the other side.
Yeah.
And now you've taken that away from her. It's not her fault. Well, that means that her redemption her redemption arc was meaningless, right?
Yeah.
That
retroactive storytelling.
Right. So it helps your storytelling in season 4, but it hurts your storytelling in the previous 3 seasons. So there's that. I will say that the last episode was really, really good, but those flashback and middle episodes sort of dragged.
Yeah. Haven't seen the last episode yet, but I think I kind of know where it's going.
Yeah.
So Malcolm, one of the things I really love is when you read a story or watch a movie or a television series or whatnot, and things aren't what they seem, but it's set up honestly, and you see, there was all these hidden clues that I didn't catch, and it paid off beautifully. Other than okay, what you said, Pete, we're gonna go retroactively say this is what happened instead of this. So
the good example of that is the story that you hate, not because it's a bad story, the Emeralds.
Neil
Gaiman's, because you think that it's Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah, I don't hate it. I just think it's been reprinted
too many times. Right.
Too many times.
Yes. Because you think it's Sherlock Holmes, and it's like, because the parallels between Sherlock Holmes and Moriarty are just so great that without details, they can be the same person.
Well, Hal, the first time I read that story, I thought it was absolutely brilliant.
Right.
Second time I read that story, I thought it was absolutely brilliant.
The 12th time you read that story.
The 12th time it ends up in an anthology. I'm like, okay, there's other Lovecraftian stories that maybe we could put in this.
Yes. I feel the same way. There's a Kim Newman story. I think it's The French Spy or something like that. About deep ones in Scotland that appeared multiple times. And
Brian Hodge, who's a wonderful writer. Is that the one you're talking about?
no, it's there's a Kim Newman story
Oh, okay.
that just was reprinted too many times in a very short period. Anyway, but yes.
Yeah.
But you know, the going back to where we were talking about is like it's set up very, very well. And because you're missing some tiny little details, you think it's Sherlock Holmes when it's actually Moriarty who's the hero. And that's good storytelling, as opposed to some of the things I write, where
I would disagree. You're a good writer. But back to Malcolm. Malcolm, why horror for you instead of writing in a different genre? Is this just what calls you to horror, do you think?
I don't know. To be honest, I suspect a lot of my other stuff isn't really necessarily horror. So I think it tends to sort of drift all over the place.
Right.
I had a collection out last year, which I think is more science fiction-y type stuff. But I tend to sort of classify my stuff as sort of slightly weird anyway, because I don't think it stays within. I don't know. I just quite like stories that sort of
weird fiction.
Yeah, kind of just accidentally fall over the wrong boundaries every now and again.
And that's what I was going to ask you. You've had a collection out, and do you have another one coming up? Do I have that right? Or
I had two collections out. I had one out in 2017 called "You Will Grow Into Them," and I had one out last year.
It was called what? I'm sorry.
You Will Grow Into Them.
You Will Grow Into Them. Okay.
I haven't got a copy here, unfortunately. Otherwise, I wave it at the camera. Had one out last year called "Unexpected Places to Fall From, Unexpected Places to Land," which is kind of weird.
Well, I love your titles. Very unique titles.
But that one's more sort of weird science fiction, I think. Or actually, there's one just very long story about people just wandering around a beach talking to each other, which I'm not entirely sure what that is. But I like things that sort of just accidentally sort of stumble over borders into the wrong genre. So I think a lot of people actually would read "And Then I Woke Up" and not actually think it's a horror story. They won't think it's horror story enough for them, or whatever, which is fair enough. So I don't know.
Well, it's very subjective, much like the beliefs of the people in your novella. You know, one person might read it and say this is horror, another person might read it and say this is weird fiction or this is sci-fi. You know. Yeah,
I tend to write stuff which I like, which is what I'd like to read. I think so. I like to do things which sort of start off maybe in one place and sort of just amble off somewhere else.
Well, it looks. I'm looking at my notes, and it looks like your "You Will Grow Into Them" collection was shortlisted for the British Fantasy Award. Is that right?
Yes, which is very flattering.
Yeah. Tell us about the one that's coming up again.
It came out last year.
Sorry.
That's all right. It's called "Unexpected Places to Fall From, Unexpected Places to Land." It's about the main story in it is about a guy who dies in every single version of reality that he exists in. At one point.
Wow, really?
Yeah, it's cheerful. It's my highest body count story, and it's not even a horror one. It's kind of weird.
No, that sounds so intriguing. Can you tell us a little bit more without spoilers? I'm serious. I love that kind of thing.
No, sure. It's called the Purpose of the Dodo is to Be Extinct, because again, weird titles, always fun.
Yes.
So it starts off with a guy dying in a car accident, and then it sort of just backtracks from there and sort of figures out that even if he hadn't done what he did, he would have died anyway. And then it pulls back to some kind of weird organization in some other reality where they track all the other versions of reality. And all the data coming through from this particular death ends up sort of forming this map that they can use to figure out how causality works in various places and so
on. Well, I'm definitely going to pick that up then.
Thank you.
Really?
It was fun and weird. Like when I was putting the collection together, I thought it'd be quite an interesting structural engine. So the other stories in the collection, some of the names have been changed so they actually fit the same characters. So you can get the idea that it's the same guy in different versions of reality doing different things. Maybe.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, definitely picking that up. So glad I asked that question.
Thank you.
I know you told me before the show that you're a bit on the shy side, but I want to tell you that. So I don't want to keep you too long, but I want to tell you that I just really loved, and then I woke up very much.
Thank you.
It is definitely not your average zombie story. So, and I guess it's not that my opinion means more than anybody else's, but I would say that if I say that I love a zombie story, it's probably a pretty damn good story, just because I'm so sick of them. So,
thank you. Well, there might be fewer zombies in it than you'd expect.
well, before we let you go, what's next for you? You working on anything right now?
Yeah, well, I'm working on something new, but I think everything's been slowed down a bit since we've just had a kid, so he's kind of just he's taking up all the bandwidth at the moment in our house.
Congratulations!
Thank you. Small screaming thing, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's Monday morning where you are, right?
It is, yeah. And
I got you up early to do the show.
Well, to be fair, he normally gets us up earlier, but he actually let us have a line today because.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Well, you're welcome to stay here with us as we talk to Stephen Mark Rainey and chat about other things, or you're welcome to go hang out with your new kid. So either way, thanks for coming on. Thanks for writing that book. I did very much enjoy it.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
So, all right. So you gonna stick around, or you taking off?
I can stick around. That's fine.
All right.
If I can.
Mark, tell us about this.
All right, I will. One thing I was not aware of Malcolm's book, but now that I am, holy shit. I'm going to be reading that. That just hit all the right notes. Everything you said hit the right nerves. I am there. All right, Fugue Devil is
everything he said or everything I said.
Who are you again?
I don't know. It's good to see you again, Mark.
Oh, well, thank you. Fugue Devil is a novelette that I wrote in 1991 that was based on a night terror that I had as an adolescent. I'm guessing it's hard to remember specifically. I'm thinking it was around 1971, somewhere between 71 and 74, because I'm old. And this dream was something that it was so vivid. It haunted me for years and years. And to this day, the memory of this multi-part night terror is probably more vivid than any waking memory I have from being a kid.
Oh, wow.
And it took me, I mean, like I said, the dream was in the early 70s, and I started writing reasonably professionally. I started writing with the intent to sell in the mid 80s, and I started selling professionally in the 80s. But to make the framework of a story out of that old dream was an aspiration of mine. It was something that it was so powerful to me in my youth, and over those years, I thought I've got to make something of this as a writer. And in the 90s, early 90s, for whatever reason, things came together creatively, and I wrote this novella. And at that time, the precursor, everybody probably knows Crossroad Press. The precursor to Crossroad Press, Macabre Inc., which was Dave Wilson, was looking to put together a series of books to sort of introduce Macabre Inc. to the world. And he asked me if I had stories that I could put together to make a collection. And that was when I thought, Fugue Devil, the story that I had finally come up with. Yeah, we're gonna put that into that collection. That was in 1992 when Fugue Devil came out. Somewhere in later years, and I'm thinking this must have been the late or mid 90s, there was a friend of mine who was a movie maker. He made indie films, Jeff Williams, and later he went by Storm Bear Williams. But he had an office for their movie studio, which was called Green Abbey, if I remember. Or no, it was Green Monk. They had a studio in Chapel Hill, which is about an hour from here, a little under an hour from here. And it was a couple of railroad cars that in downtown Chapel Hill, they use these railroad cars for different purposes. You can rent them out. So they put their office for the movie studio in the railroad cars. And what do you know? As soon as that happened, I had the sequel to the original dream of Fugue Devil. So I wrote the sequel to the story that was, and it was published, I think it was a little magazine called Midnight Shambler. But anyway, between those two stories, I had created a narrative that sort of described the dream horrors of my younger days.
That's saying a lot if that's if that's such a huge memory and it's a nightmare, you know.
Yeah, and if you read Fugue Devil, what I ended up doing was taking the pivotal moments of that night horror and making them integral to the story. But I realized early on, I can't take this dream and just, write it as a dream, because that doesn't work thematically, dramatically. And I knew in real life a couple of people who had been going through specific personal crises. So I, certainly without permission, I took ownership of these crises and wove them into what I felt like at the time, and I still do today, feel like was a drama that took my old night horror and wove it into a real world context and made them somehow symbiotic. And maybe that's vain, I don't know, but I feel like this was the most personally meaningful fictional construct I had ever made. And so quite recently, early this year, Samara Wynn, who is a writer, and she publishes her own work. It's fantasy. It's high fantasy for the most part. But she had been looking to expand her label, the Black Raven Books.
Right.
She wanted to start bringing on board other writers whose work meant something to her. And she approached me with the Fugue Devil project. And I thought, I think I can do this. It turned out it was a good deal. And I had over, and you know this from the stuff from Lovecraft eZine and all, a lot of my earlier work, my very early work was very inspired by Lovecraft. Threnody, for one, is a story that was based on the music of eZine. And I remembered when that story, the eZine story, resonated with me for some reason. And when I looked back into my earliest days, there was an LP, an old LP called A Child's Introduction to Music. And I had in my head, because this was many years earlier, that it was that name Zahn, Z-A-N-N, had significance for me. So when I looked back, I thought that album, this Child's Introduction to Music, that had it was for kids. It was a kid's record. But it had a certain grimness to some of the music it played and stuff like that. And so I decided to name the character in Threnody Maurice Zahn and make him a relative of Eric Zahn. I found out,
Nice, yeah.
so once the internet became far more accessible, I discovered that record, the person.
I think
who
it's a
put that-
passing fad, actually. I don't think it's going to last. The internet, that internet. thing.
yeah,
It's just a fad.
but the name of the individual who put that record out was named Maurice Zam, Z-A-M. But in my young brain, I had seen two N's there, so I made this sort of false connection. And yet that one story, Threnody, sort of served as the jumping off point for so many of my later stories. So in Fugue Devil, the book here, I put the original story, Fugue Devil.
Mhm.
I put the story Threnody, which indirectly is a backstory for Fugue Devil. And then at the end of the book, I put the sequel, which is called The Devil's Eye, which is based on the dream that I later had that was, where I said those train cars served as an office for a movie maker. And the dream that I had took place in those train cars. A good portion of it did. So I've set up a trilogy of stories, I guess. And in this book, I decided they all needed to be there. They all needed to be there together. And then in between those are stories that are either tangentially related or just, I felt fit the weird mode.
Well, on that note, first of all, as always, guys, a link to the books, Malcolm's book, Mark's book, is in the show notes, whether you're listening to this later or watching on YouTube now or later. This is called Fugue Devil Resurgence, a 30th anniversary celebration of the Fugue Devil and Other Weird Horrors, by Stephen Mark Rainey. First of all, the Fugue Devil, if you know about it, it knows about you. If you see it, it will come for you. It leads me to a question based on what you were just saying from Patreon and good friend Mike DeBronzo. He says, besides the stories The Fugue Devil and The Devil's Eye, does the Fugue Devil appear in any other stories? I first read these stories in The Last Trumpet, excellent collection. So are those all here?
Those are the only two Fugue Devil stories.
Okay. I wasn't sure either. Yeah.
I feel like that those two stories, they tell everything you need to know about this this faux folklore. I feel like that somehow
I like that.
Yeah, it was. I think because of my connection to folklore as a kid. I mean, I grew up in rural Virginia and was exposed to a lot of folklore. And my favorite movies and such back when I was a youngster. Okay. Let me scoot back a little bit. And I know I've told you this story. I know you've heard this story before. Where I grew up, there were whippoorwills that in the woods around my house, and this eerie, mournful cry that they made, they scared the hell out of me. And that was because in my youngest days, the movies I watched tended to be the 50s and 60s horror, science fiction, black and white movies, Outer Limits, Twilight Zone, stuff like that. And the sounds these birds made to me, were the sounds of the monsters and the aliens and the stuff that
Yeah.
that came out of those old movies and all. And plus, there were, my parents told me bedtime stories that were a little bit creepy, stuff from the folklore of their youth. So that's why I call it sort of folklore, because these and nowadays
there's
there's the
it's
whole
like
subgenre,
folk horror
the folk
Yeah.
horror thing, yeah.
exactly.
And I feel like those were kind of my roots, and so with the Fugue Devil, I just wanted to take it to its logical, the extension.
Well, I can't remember when it was, but when I, first heard about the Fugue Devil, the thing that really, about the story, the thing that grabbed me and made me think, I want to read this, was the fact that, if you know about it, it knows about you, and I thought, maybe I've heard variations on that, but if I have, I don't remember.
That was
I kind of like it.
That aspect of it was a slight distortion of the actual dream that I had. And like I said, this, and as I describe this to you, I can see, just like on a movie screen, seeing the images of that dream in front of my face. The thing in the dream was that I was probably, like I said, somewhere between 11 and 13 years old. I was in the dream out in the neighborhood, which looked just like my real neighborhood. It was not distorted in any way. I looked up in the sky and I saw this smoking, zigzagging shape going through the sky.
He's a good looking guy.
Yeah. Yeah, it was actually just a black thing, shapeless black thing zigzagging across the sky, trailing black smoke. And apparently my friend Chuck, who in my dreams, Chuck knew shit. Chuck always knew shit. So if I had any question about what was going on in my dream, all I had to do was ask Chuck, because he knew.
Well, right. Chuck knows everything on Supernatural too, if you remember.
No.
The TV show.
Now that you bring it up, yeah. But
you're going to be suing the Supernatural folks shortly.
A plot. But in that old nightmare, Chuck told me, he goes, that is the thing that's up there. It was not called the Fugue Devil. That came later. That came as a result of music of eZine. But this devil thing going through the sky, he says, if you see it and you are the last one to look away from it, it's going to kill you. And that became the basis for this night terror, which had 3 parts.
This sort of reminds me of Pete Rosso's Basilic. I'm not saying that right. Rollo's Basilic. I'll look it up while you know what I'm talking about, though, right?
It reminds me of a Wendigo.
I can see that. I can see that. The first part of the dream was the sighting of this thing and realizing that I'm doomed because I saw it and I turned away from it, and everybody else had turned away sooner. The second, and what happened was I woke up literally in a cold sweat. It's the first and only time that ever happened in my life. I was terrified. My heart was pounding and I was sweating cold bullets. And eventually I went back to sleep, and then the dream took up exactly where it left off. And at that point, much like happened in real life, I mean, I was seeing my house just like it was in real life. My dad was out cooking steaks in the backyard. He had to go inside. And when he went inside, I heard this thump, thump, thump in the wooded hillside behind the house. And this gigantic dog, some kind of a hound that was bigger than a horse, came trotting through the yard. And then I remembered Chuck, who knew everything, told me that he has a bloodhound, the Fugue Devil. And this was the bloodhound running through my yard. And then I heard the thump, thump. And there was this creature standing on the hillside that looked like an amalgamation of the creature from the Black Lagoon, probably because I had the Aurora creature from the Black Lagoon model in those days. The face from the creature from Night of the Demon or Curse of the Demon, with the horns and the wolf-like face, and the big, huge gold wings of King Ghidorah from the Japanese monster. And this thing was standing on the hillside, and as soon as I saw that thing, I woke up. Pow.
Let me also, it's Fugue Devil Resurgence, but I also want to read some of this, a little bit more of this on the back. Okay. Now 30 years later, Fugue Devil Resurgence celebrates the publication of the original novelette and features 11 more stories of deep cosmic dread, including the Devil's Eye and the next chapter of the chilling Fugue Devil legend. So if you're listening or watching this show, I'm going to assume that you like deep cosmic dread stories. So that's another reason to pick up this book. And also, I'm sure the others want to grill you too. And I found out what I was looking for. Roko's Basilisk, but we can talk about that later. Pete, Rick, you guys want to talk to Mark? Bridget?
Yeah, I want to raise another story that he in the collection, Pons Divina.
Oh yeah,
the Roman Empire story.
Yeah,
which I believe is sort of a disguised mythos story. Even
it is. It's a prequel to the Dreams in the Witch House.
Yeah, I caught that.
Yeah, I figured that was one of those stories that I could make stand on its own. While if you read it to its conclusion, you're going to realize that that is a prequel to Dreams in the Witch House that sort of explains Brown Jenkins. Whether it worked or not, I have no idea. The story was for a particular anthology that never quite panned out. And I thought, well, it has the dread aspect, at least I hope so. Seemed to fit the theme of the Fugue Devil book. So there it went.
Pete?
So
if you're done fishing, you caught all the fish in the
I am
Florida
exhausted.
Ocean.
The last 48 hours have been it's been a whirlwind weekend.
Yeah.
Everybody tried to shove everything to Father's Day weekend, and I'm in a lot of pain.
So Pete,
What?
before we get to this question or questions that you have for Mark, let's talk about your activities of the previous evening. What did you do? Anything interesting?
This is going to be true horror. Is that correct?
It is.
All right. So what Mike is referring to is all right. So let's set the Wayback Machine. 20 years ago, I was an integral member of a Rocky Horror Picture Show troupe that operated in West Palm Beach for a decade.
This is
And
good.
Did you just post a Facebook picture of the Rocky Horror thing?
I did.
Oh, yeah, I saw it.
Going to Facebook right now.
And so this was 20 years ago. One of our castmates recently passed away, and as a tribute for him, we all got together, and last night we cold did a show for him in his memory. We are not in our 20s and 30s anymore.
Well, you're not.
Things have gotten a little bloated, flabby. We're old.
You look so nice in that.
I do. You know what? I clean up nice, don't I?
Yeah, you do. You do. Yeah. I don't know if it worked, but I tried to show the audience. I don't know.
I saw it. Put it back up.
Well, the last time I did this, they said that they saw a black screen, but yes, I'll put it back up. Share screen. There we go. There we go. All right. So audience members, I hope you can see Mr. Pete Rollick there in front of it.
That's not bad. That's a good picture. Who took that picture? Anyway, yes. So, I have not done Rocky in more than 20 years, and it hurt. We finished at like 1:30 in the morning, and we cleaned up, and then I didn't, went and had breakfast. I didn't get home until 4:30 this morning. So
I wish I had half your energy, man. Wish I had a quarter of your energy.
All right. So there's Excedrin, Aspercreme, and melatonin. And I'm assuming, so this is actually Stephen Mark Rainey getting back. This all ties back in. He's this huge hiker.
Yeah, we should probably talk about the guest, yeah.
Oh,
He does geocaching. So he, I'm sure, understands the benefits of painkillers and excess exercise.
Preaching to the choir, man. I understand the benefits of painkillers.
I was out this morning, put in some mileage, so I have a little bit of that's the thing about going out hiking, doing all that. It's a good kind of ache. It hurts like hell. Every year it hurts a little bit more, but every time it hurts a little bit more, I figure, well, this is good. This is good. Even if I don't believe it's really good, I tell myself it's really, really good.
It's a good hurt, right?
Yeah.
Well, I just had to get that Rocky Horror Picture Show stuff out there before you got into
well, I
Mark
appreciate
Rainey.
that.
You're very welcome. You probably shouldn't tell me these things if you don't want me to.
It's okay.
Tell the class.
Okay, so the funny thing is I have not been to a Rocky show in 20 years. And I heard lines from the audience last night that I had not heard ever before because they didn't exist before. There are references now to Trump and Fight Club and a few other things. And it makes me think that I want to write sort of this study of regional Rocky Horror lines and maybe even international or things that have only come up in the last few years because of work that other artists have done that have affected the genre.
I didn't know you could ad lib the.
Yeah, absolutely. That is one of. So
I've only been once, so
yeah. Well, the whole thing is being ad libbed, and the ad libs are changing as any good oral story should.
That's true.
But this is actually, if you think about it, somewhere in this country and probably around the world, there are hundreds of these shows being put on annually. And they probably respond to changes in films and news and localities that we don't all see. It's a great oral storytelling thing that is probably evolving over the years, and I would love to study it a little bit more.
So, yeah.
Anyway.
Any more questions for Mark? Rick?
Yes.
I know you do.
So I think of Stephen Mark Rainey as, first of all, Death Realm.
Yeah.
And, you and I are part of what I think of as Brian Salmon's stable of writers.
That's that's funny. I've been doing a bunch of interviews on my blog lately, and Brian's going to be. I just did. Glenn Barris had a interview on the blog. Brian's going to do an interview on the blog. So if you're not careful, you might end up on the blog. So just watch yourself.
Did you get paid today?
Did I? No.
Oh, okay. I got paid today.
Yeah.
Not by me.
Those Brian and Glenn have put out some wonderful, wonderful mythos related books. But the one that stands out so much is In the Court of the Yellow King, and my story from The Mask of the Queen that was in the Court of the Yellow King is in Fugue Devil. But there, to my mind, a lot of those books are what really keeps the mythos going. I mean, it is what is it, World War Cthulhu and
Right.
Return of the Old Ones. Those have got some great freaking stories that these guys put together, and I really hope that stuff keeps going.
Yeah.
I really,
Beyond the Mountains of Madness.
yeah.
Yeah, Brian is a guy who he's very, and his wife, very passionate about horror
Mhm.
books and horror movies. He watches probably almost as watch almost as many horror movies as Pete Raleigh does.
Yeah.
I
You know, and
almost.
my wife is not as much into the Lovecraftian stuff, but she loves bizarre movies, horror movies, just off the wall movies. So she has introduced me. You know, a lot of times if you ever follow me on Facebook, you'll see pictures of my cat,
Right.
watching.
We all know the cat, yeah.
Frasier watches, Frasier likes.
If you're watching me on my piano bench back there, you can see a sleeping.
Yeah, I
cat.
see him, but so many of the movies that my cats love are we're watching them because Kim, my wife, is very keen on watching horror movies, and she's actually introduced me to a few. And the only thing, Kim is younger than I am, and she likes a lot of the later stuff. And when I start, let's watch something from like 1972, like The Legend of Boggy Creek, and that.
Oh,
She's like, I was a drive-in freak. I love drive-in movies, and on the good side, we actually have an operating drive-in 30 minutes
Nice.
road from us. So we go to that.
I do too. It's about 25 minutes away.
Nice. The only thing is they show mostly mainstream movies, and I wish they would focus a little bit more on.
You just need to be glad that they're even there.
Ends. Oh, you know it. We go
Yeah.
there. We, especially in the spring and fall when the temperatures are good, we go hang out.
And the thing is, you have to, you can, but you shouldn't sneak in your food, because
no. They have the best goddamn cheeseburgers.
Well, it's not just that. It's the fact that they make next to
have
no
cheeseburgers. It would not be the drive-in.
Well, the drive-ins make next to no money from the films themselves. They make the majority of their money from
that place.
their
I tell you this.
stand.
And this was a few years back when the first the remake of It came out, and it showed at the drive-in. We couldn't get in. There was a traffic jam for miles leading into the drive-in, so we couldn't even go see it. It was so jam-packed.
It's funny, my wife's relationship to horror. You talking about your wife and horror, and I noticed today that the new It is on Netflix.
Yeah.
This month. I say, hey Danielle, there's It. You want to watch that again? That's the movie where, if she hadn't been, we saw it in the theater. If she hadn't been locked into position between me and my son Logan, she said she would have run out of the theater on part one. So that's how scared she was.
Yeah, I have mixed feelings on the It movies. The first one kept me going. The second one, I've tried to watch it 3 times and I kept falling asleep. So that's not a good sign.
No, I think we're on the same page there. I thought the first one was really great, and the second one, I still have not watched the whole thing because it's just boring as hell.
Now, if I saw it at the drive-in theater, it might make it about 2 steps better, if you understand.
Yeah. So, all right. What else do we have to talk to Mark about or Malcolm about? And then I've got a couple of things I want to throw out there.
I've got a King in Yellow question for him.
Yeah.
In your story, you kind of walk the balance of writing a Chambers story and a mythos story.
Yeah.
I was reading this and saying, oh, this is completely Chambers, Hast is a city, not a person. And then out of nowhere, you throw in a buyer key from Derwitz.
Yeah. I figured that was, I don't know. It was just a wild hair. I thought, I'm going to go with the Chambers story, and then the actual play itself, the King in Yellow play, the James Blish story that has the transcript. I pretty much decided that's canon. I'm going to go with it, and without infringing on copyright, I decided I'm gonna throw that in there, and then I'm just gonna go the whole. You know what I had in mind? I had in mind fucking Twin Peaks. I had some David Lynch in my head, and I'm just gonna start throwing these dreamlike ideas and pulling them together and bring in characters from established properties in as much as I could, and just take it to the farthest extreme that my imagination could, drawing on the original, the pre-existing properties, and then just take it where I could. And I don't know, to be honest, I don't even know if it made sense. I don't know. I'm the writer. What the hell do I know? These things happened, and I have a soft spot for that story. And Kim, I brought up Kim, my wife, who shows me horror movies and shit. She didn't know jack shit about the King in Yellow. She's never read Chambers. She's hardly read any Lovecraft. But she said that was one of her favorite stories in the book because it touched her in weird places, weirder than I take stuff. But that made me feel good that to the uninitiated that story hit on certain cylinders.
Have you read what is it, Pete? Memento Mori, the Fathomless Shadows, by Brian? Oh man, just blanked on his last name.
Oh, I'll look it up for you because it just went out of my head too. Hauser.
Yeah, Hauser. That's right. Yeah. Well, I asked because of Rick's question, the King in Yellow question, and that's a sort of a King in Yellow mythos novel, I guess you might say, Pete.
Yeah, it's Mark. It's a King in Yellow story, which you get backhanded into because the guy is researching independent film and old film fanzines, and
right, it's
he finds a college.
Brilliant.
What's this story?
Memento Mori.
Okay, I don't think I've read it.
Memento Mori, the Fathomless Shadows.
I'm gonna have to because
I also need to know from you guys. You don't have to do it now, of course, but someone asked me for more. Someone on Twitter asked me for recommendations for King in Yellow stories. I said, do you mean anthologies? Because that's easy. Or do you mean novels? And he said novels. So, I threw that one at him, but I need some more to throw at him because maybe I've read them, but I can't think of any others at the moment. But that's very good, Mark.
What's the one by Brian McNaughton that he did? A house. It was originally
Brian McNaughton did a King in Yellow story. I knew Brian, and I published Brian in Death Realm, and he to me was a brilliant writer, troubled human being, brilliant writer. And if there is something of his that I haven't read, I want it. I wanna
Is that
read
one of the 4 Gemini novels?
Yeah, it was originally a porno novel, and then
Yeah.
he straightened it out. It's House by the River or
it.
something.
Yeah, he did do the porn.
Yeah. It was
Gotta pay the bills, man.
Yeah.
All right. Bridget, you got any? I don't.
Is Bridget here? I don't.
She's very quiet today.
She's final. She's very final.
Quit picking on me.
No. Here, you know what? I'm gonna
I'll ask the important questions. What are you drinking, Mark? Is that a martini?
That is
It
an important
is.
question.
Yeah, it's just your standard vodka martini, shaken, not stirred, you know.
Finally, somebody asked
Clean or dirty?
the real question. Yeah.
No, I think we all need a truck in our lives. Is what I was thinking. It's like a really cool, almost dream spirit guide.
I have a system. Both Kim and I, my wife, we drink a little on Monday night for having survived Monday. On Wednesday is like usually movie night, so we have a little wine on Wednesday night. Friday nights are have at it. Saturday nights are have at it. Sunday is usually a non-drinking night, but because
You young people, man. I don't know how you
but
do it.
because I might need a little lubrication to actually express myself on a Sunday night. Is it Sunday?
It's always Sunday. And
Now that
unless
I'm retired, I can't keep up with shit. I don't.
Isn't that the way it's supposed to be, though?
I suppose. Yeah, this whole retirement thing that I retired back in February, and I don't know what to make of.
That's right. Yeah.
I don't know what to make of it. I tell you this, I finished 2 books that and to be fair, I'd started them before retirement, but I finished 2, and I've been working like hell to plot a brand new novel.
I was about to say, I really hope you're not going to sit here and bitch about being retired, because I'm going to
God,
boot you
no.
off the show.
I don't know how anybody can bitch about being retired. Back in the fall of last year, we went to Italy and France, and there was a place we stayed in Italy that was both. It was kind of creepy. It was a 300-year-old Italian villa that, it's a freaking Airbnb now, but it was an old villa, and the folks that were the proprietors who lived on the property, they were so sweet, it was scary. It was like the lady's name was Vilma, and her husband, all she referred to him was her husband, was my husband for a long time. He didn't speak any English. He only spoke Italian. So we only knew of them, and we started calling him Fred and Vilma.
My mind went there, and I wasn't going to say it out loud.
But yeah. You may.
Yeah.
But at one point, on our very first day, when she was showing us through the villa and all, there was a fly. There was a fly, and then she smashed it with her hand, and then she started laughing maniacally and go, "I am a killer! I am a killer!"
God.
And that set my mind in motion, man. And there were several other incidents and just really lovely, weird things that we experienced in Italy. So I've decided to write a novel. And I'm currently plotting a novel set in Italy based on some of our adventures, taken to an extreme beyond our.
You can see what a brilliant interviewer Bridget is, because based on this "what are you drinking" question, you follow the threads, and now you're talking about writing a novel.
And I was gonna actually state it, but I didn't have to. He understood my question anyways and answered it.
Yeah. I'm just,
And it's
every
most
time she's on the
appreciated.
show, I learn more. You know?
We
So-
bow to your skills as an intern.
Oh my
Right.
goodness.
Now, speaking of Bridget Brenmark and her husband, I don't remember his name, Mike Brenmark. You know what? It's good to have friends, because Bridget described a book. It's called The Dead Handbook: Stories from Gravesend Cemetery by Lady Sarah Richard. And here it is. And it's illustrated by the author. There's if you're watching, I'm just showing several pages of the book, and if you're listening later, pick it up if you can. And it's so I had it ever since she talked about it, like what, 2 weeks ago or something.
That was
I
last
would-
week, I think.
Okay. Well, I kept it in my, I looked it up and I kept that browser tab open. Okay. And I'm like, $25, $17 used. I can't justify this. You know, I'm not, my wife's a school teacher, and I'm, you know, this is how I make money, which is, you know, I'm grateful for the money I get, but it's, you know, I don't ride around in limousines or anything. So I'm like, can I spend the money on this? So the other day I'm looking at it on the browser and I'm going, oh, this looks so good, but no, I better not. And I walk my dog, I come back, and there's a box sitting in front of my door. And so I'm like, I opened the box and this book is in it, the one that I was just looking at, and on my browser, and it's from Bridget Brenmark and her husband Mike Brenmark. Thank you very much. This is a really lovely book.
Well, it was just one of those things that I was like, Mike needs this.
Yeah,
You-
it's
You've done a few nice things for me now and then, so.
well, thank you. But
There are times that I'm convinced that there's nothing seriously wrong with mine.
is that one?
Sometimes.
Is that a backhanded compliment? Is that what that is? Yeah. Well, now I'm, as you guys know, and the audience know, I'm every week now, every time we do the podcast, I've got it besides the guests, books. And then I Woke Up by Malcolm Devlin, and Fugue Devil Resurgence by Stephen Mark Rainey, whoever the guest is. I also post at least 4 or 5 books, because my biggest faux complaint about this show is that people's TBR piles increase. So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to lean into that.
Well, see, this episode, my file is already increasing as we speak.
Yeah, you really do have to read Malcolm's book, Mark.
I am
really
because this
incredible.
This is the most expensive podcast you can listen to.
That's true. So anyway, that's the first one on our TBR for this week. Okay, The Dead Handbook: Stories from Gravesend Cemetery. And if you're listening later and you can't see this on the screen, obviously, it is beautiful. It really, really is. Next on our TBR, and that's by Lady Sarah Richmond. And all of these I have in the show notes. You don't even have to look them up. You can just click the links. A Suitable Host by Leslie Lawrence, and I'll just briefly read what that is about. Let's see here. All right, it's on Kindle for only $4.99, and there is a monster in Tilly's quiet little town. Her life of routine factory work, punctuated by a needle felting hobby, is about to be interrupted. First by B, a stranger she can't seem to avoid, and then a monster. Tilly thinks her only problem is her strange and unwanted house guest. Then the killing starter and her house guest may be the only one who can stop them. B must convince Tilly that the monster is real before it does. It may have always been there, and it has taken an interest in Tilly. All right, so That's Suitable Host by Leslie Lawrence. Next, we have Thoughts of God by Michael Cannelly. It's on Kindle Unlimited. I just happen to have the paperback. Picked it up like 15 years ago at a used bookstore. It's a mystery set in the late 90s. That's when it was written, I believe. But it's one of the more unique books I've ever read because it's a, well, I'll just read the back. It's a novel unlike you have ever read. Well, we've heard that before, but it is kind of true. It's a thriller, the tale of two modern day hunters, one a killer of innocent children, the other a vigilante who vows to take him down. Yet it is so much more. It sees into the future and dwells on the past. It reaches into the galaxies of the universe to recount otherworldly struggles for life and death. And it takes you into the notebook of God, where questions, answerable and unanswerable, build to a violent, dizzying climax of earthly justice and cosmic vengeance. And basically my take on this is that, you know, like in between chapters of this modern day, you know, late 90s mystery, it's basically, it seems to me that the creator of the universe, the whole universe, is an experiment that God's running to answer questions that he hasn't been able to answer yet. And it's just a really interesting book. And if you got Kindle Unlimited, you can, you know, it's free to you. So anyway, Thoughts of God by Michael Cannelly. Again, the link is in the show notes, K-A-N-A-L-Y. So there you go. There's another book. Okay, Cruise of Shadows by Jean Ray. And that's translated by our friend Scott Nickley. And I really have to applaud him for his work on this. This is a beautiful book from Wakefield Press. And Scott did all the hard work, well, besides Jean Ray. These are really, really great weird fiction stories. Jean Ray, Cruise of Shadows, also linked. And last but not least, Tim Wagner just came out with Writing in the Dark, the Workbook. So Tim's a great writer, and you know, if you're listening, if you're a writer or inspiring writer, I'd pick this up. So there's the TBR for this week. I do want to mark myself safe, Ezra Miller safe. You know, all the bars are open in my town, which I can only take to mean that he's not blazed his way through Texas yet. So, but he is, Pete and Rick, single-handedly destroying the DC extended universe as we know it. Wouldn't you say?
Is this film ever going to get released? Because
starting to hope not.
Unless they film it with somebody else playing the Flash.
What is with this kid? I mean, geez. I mean, I say kid, I don't know how old he is, 30, something like that. I don't know. But maybe he really is the Flash, because he seems to be circling the globe, you know, getting into bar fights and doing other kinds of
whack job stuff.
He's more like that character.
Allegedly.
He's like that character he played in The Stand. That blows up things.
Which character?
He played the guy was the explosives guy.
Oh, the newsstand.
Yeah, the news. Yeah,
the newsstand.
Garbage Man.
Garbage Man. Yeah.
Oh, he played Garbage Man? I tried watching this newsstand series, but it was just sort of slow.
I haven't seen the new one. The Stand was one of those books that I loved and loved and loved, and then comes the end, and I threw the book across the room.
Yeah.
So, how do you feel about the ending?
I threw the book across the room.
All right then.
That was a segue to a book that I was trying to recommend, The Brian May Norton King in Yellow novel is The House Across the Way.
Okay.
Okay.
Hardcover is about $37. You get an Audible for $0 for free if you have Audible.
All right. Thank you. All right. So yeah, Ezra Miller. I mean, you know, here's what they should do. I heard that Soldier Boy wants to play Batman on, you know, the WB. I think that a Batman series focusing on the detective angle would be just great. But hey, are you watching The Boys so far, you guys?
Yep.
I'm up to date on The Boys.
I'm up to date on The Boys. I'm loving it.
It's thought provoking.
It knows no bounds. I'll say that.
Yeah.
There's some unique weapons in episode 4.
Yeah. Yes.
So
It's also now been made apparent to some fans of The Boys that it's actually political satire and not something to aspire to. But you know, that Homelander is actually a bad guy.
no shit.
That was kind of obvious from the beginning, I think.
Yeah.
Well, the guy is terrifying. Really.
Yeah.
Best villain on TV, probably.
Chelsea Goodwin, long time audience member. Thank you, Chelsea, for that. She says, did you throw the last Gunslinger book across the room too? I did. So
Yeah.
poor King, man. The guy's gonna be a pauper for you two, you know. He's gonna be on the welfare line if this keeps up. So anyway, Ezra Miller free. All right, I learned something. Pete, did you know this? You probably did, and you and Rick probably did know this. The Pale Brown Thing by Fritz Leiber.
Yeah.
Yes. What about it?
Oh, you did know about it.
What? Well, I know about the book.
I didn't.
This Lady of Dark, it was rewritten.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here's a quote. Leiber felt I ordered it. I found a really cheap one. Leiber felt the two texts should be regarded as the same story told at different times. If Franz's story is longer in Our Lady of Darkness, the reason is that he recalls more the second time he tells us. And so both versions stand as valid tellings. I quote that having not read the book yet. I've read Our Lady of Darkness
Holy
several
shit.
times.
Tell me again. That
All
what's
right.
the name? What's the title?
The Pale Brown Thing.
Pale Brown Thing.
That was published that was the serialized version of the.
Holy shit. I want.
Well, I didn't even put that on the
It
TBR.
was serialized in fantasy. and
Holy
science
shit.
fiction.
Because I mean, Leiber is one of my heroes, one of my favorite stories of it's not necessarily Lovecraftian, but it is what's it, Bit of the Dark World, I believe it's called. One of my favorite stories of all time, and that I would call that one of the most influential stories.
Well, Rick was saying it was serialized in FNSF.
Fantasy and science fiction.
All right.
Right. And it's on Amazon for not that much really, in hardcover.
I am there.
So
$17.
That must be a different version of Our Lady of Darkness.
Nice.
Right. And so that's what the quote was. He's saying, he recalls more when he tells the story a second time.
It's like having Who Goes There and the Frozen Hell.
yes.
That's a great analogy. Yeah. Something Benjamin Handelman told me a couple weeks ago. So we were talking about when we were getting your mic fixed a couple months ago, or getting you a new mic, Rick. Ben's like, yep, you gotta get that done, because he was texting me because Rick is the most important person on the show. And he goes, then like 5 minutes later, I didn't have time to reply. I was doing something else. And 5 minutes later, he's like, no offense. So it's like,
But you know, one thing.
none taken.
To go back to Liber,
Yeah.
I think Our Lady of Darkness was ripped off by Dario De Gena for Inferno. Not for Suspiria, but for when he did the second movie, Inferno. You got the three sisters and you got a crazy architect. Basically the same.
Mm. Yeah.
So if you're going to say that,
let me just say before you, for those who are listening later, Malcolm is still here, and I just wanted to say, Malcolm, if you want to say anything, feel free to pipe up at any time, or if you're just listening to us, go on. That's fine too. So, yeah, Pete, what?
so if you're going to say that, then I'm going to say that the dealings of Daniel Kesserich.
Thank you for finally reading this book.
I'm going to say that Fritz Lieber's dealings of Daniel Kesserich is probably a huge influence on the film Donnie Darko.
Oh God, I love Donnie.
Okay, so the
And the soundtrack.
the premise of Fritz Leiber's book is that there's a guy doing time travel experiments in this town, and they're leaving time snakes. Basically, when they travel through time, the path that they have gone through is left behind in their wake. Just like in Donnie Darko.
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
And both towns are suffering severe psychotic episodes because they're having trouble rectifying divergent memories from two different time streams that are now brought together. Those are the two major points of the book. And they're prevalent in Donnie Darko. They're key points.
I love it. And more importantly, I finally talked you into reading it.
And, you know, the Bronzo sent me the book.
Well, thank God.
So
The unsung hero.
the Bronzo who's not
Mike
here.
the Bronzo. No, he's not here. Well, it's not. I actually had it on a TBR a few weeks ago. Yes, it's another Fritz Leiber, The Dealings of Daniel Kesserich. And let me just read a couple paragraphs from chapter 1, because this will give you a real good idea if you want to buy it or not, and you do. Being a city dweller, I was astonished by the way the main cross street of Smithville, California, ended suddenly in the desert. I suppose that back in New York, I had unconsciously thought of streets as going on forever. If they did end, it would be at an apartment building or a river. But this one led to an ocean of sand and sage and then stopped. It was as if it said, go through the desert in what direction you will. There are an infinite number of directions in the desert, but watch your step, for I am done with you. I have done my work in leading you here. So I really like this. I know you had some criticisms, Pete, and you know, it's early Fritz Leiber, but I've got a soft spot for this book. And I'm not saying you're wrong, but
No, and the other thing is that I say is that, like, that is what he's saying right there, I think, is Leiber goes on to develop this sort of megapolisomancy in some later stories. The magic of big cities. That's the idea that cities have their own magic.
yeah.
And what you just wrote there is that the same thing, that you can see the beginnings of it, that idea that towns have magic.
He's also using it as an analogy, then the next paragraph of saying, if human beings ever gain the ability to travel in different directions in time, you know, it's like choosing any direction in the desert as opposed to following a street, going left, right, straight, or whatever. By the way, I was in a small town with my wife and my mom yesterday, not too far from here. We were garage sailing, and I don't think I've been in this town before, but it's like only 20 minutes away. So there were several garage sales in the area. The reason why I bring this up is because the sign says, I was about to turn left. Danielle's like, this is a one-way street. I'm like, there's nobody around here. There's like 10 houses in the town. She's like, it's a one-way street. And she says, look at the sign. It says, the sign literally says one way. And then beneath it, it says, and the one way is to the right. Beneath it, it says, left turns anytime.
I saw that on your face.
I'm like, what?
Yeah.
What?
It's the left-right game.
Yeah, I guess so. So yeah.
Mike, while we're
Yeah.
on while we're on the subject, have you ever been to some place and never been able to get back there?
Well, they say
Mhm.
that no man steps into the same river twice because it's not the same river and he's not the same man, if that's what you mean. But probably not.
Okay, never mind.
Yeah, you mean like Eric Zahn? Yeah, I think so, but nothing comes to mind.
Okay.
Why do you ask?
Well, you're saying that you've been to this, you went yard selling the other day. I go booking a lot.
Yeah.
And many years ago, I followed street signs, like little, not streets, but signs that somebody put out. I followed them to a library book sale at some library that in some small town in the middle of Broward County, someplace.
Was this in the Gaslight era or?
No,
later?
this is like maybe 15 years ago.
Oh, okay.
And for the life of me, I can't get back there.
You can't go home again, Pete.
I have traveled to like every library in Broward County and trying to find this place, and I can't find it.
Well, this is
Maybe it's an age thing. Maybe it's
That's
just
amazing.
an age thing,
Either put down.
because we get old and
Yeah, I get that, Mark and Steve. Yeah,
you sure do.
Mr. Rainey, I get it, but the thing is, I'm like,
Call
using
me
Google
sir,
Earth.
God damn it.
Like, I'm using the maps, and I can't find it. It was like I got there, I bought books, and then it's gone.
Well, this is literally how Eric Zahn starts, as
Yeah.
you know, as you well
I
know.
love it.
yeah.
It's a forbidden pocket of the universe.
Which brings us to Marie Son by implication.
It all comes back round.
All right. Perhaps last but not least, who watched Mad God on Shudder yet?
I watched Mad God.
have
Not yet.
Have not yet.
Not yet.
All right. What's your spoiler-free opinion, Pete?
I'm hurt.
Is it a sort of a
He's hurt, but you were hurting
love
from
story
fishing.
or
Yeah, no, there's
this is a rom-com, isn't it? Mad God?
no. In fact, so I would agree with. So there is a critic out there who has pointed out that there's very little plot. I would agree that on the first simplistic watching, there's very little plot. I would also suggest that there is a huge plot. It's just very, very depressing. It is
Well,
a very
It's right there in the title.
it's
Hidden. It's
yeah.
hidden in the title. Mad God.
It's a bleak look at a universe, a world that is,
If there is a God, he fucking hates you, kind of thing.
yeah. So how like in Warhammer 20,000, 30,000, whatever,
40K.
40K, it's a horrific universe. And like, if you want to travel the galaxy, you actually have to go through hell to get there. And there are mutants and monsters everywhere. This makes that look like paradise. Mad God is that universe, that world is just terrifyingly bleak.
Well, I haven't watched it yet, but a couple weeks ago I posted the preview on the big Facebook page, and got a lot of views. And Phil Tibbett said thanks for putting it there. So I thought, okay, this is a good excuse to do something I normally wouldn't do. I messaged him on Facebook and I said, I'd love to have you on my podcast. And the next day he said, can I have your email address? And I gave him my email address. And then I haven't heard back from him. So I'm sure he's a very busy man, but so there's a slight possibility we can get him on the show. It just depends, I suppose.
Now, I'm going to say that I've said it's bleak. It's very hard to watch because it is at the same time beautiful in an alien H.R. Geiger kind of way. It's monstrously created, but the skill and care that went into creating this film it's just amazing.
What I heard was he kept doing this, setting the project aside, doing it more over the years, and then some friends said, "You got to do this." Simplified down what happened, and I also read that he almost had a nervous breakdown about it too.
It's a really good film, but. Imagine the Dark Crystal if it had been made by Geiger, and that Geiger, instead of being obsessed with women's anatomy, was obsessed with male anatomy.
I don't know what that means.
Oh boy.
I can imagine.
All right, you know how
Sounds like The Boys.
You don't have to explain it. It's all right.
No, I have a really good thing to say here.
All right.
Darwin has asked, if in all your studying of the world and its animal life, what does that tell you about God? And he said that God has an unusual fascination with beetles, because there's so many beetles and they're so beautiful. And I would suggest that Phil Tippett's Mad God has an unusual fascination with the scrotal area.
Okay.
So there's that.
Which means it's like The Boys.
I'm with Kim Smelter, popping popcorn.
I think it's like The Boys then.
Yeah.
All right. Matt's out of town, isn't he? Because he's not here today.
Right. He's out of town. He's in Mexico.
Mexico. Oh, yes. I saw he posted on Facebook that he's finally read or reading Summer of Night by Dan Simmons, which is one of my favorite books.
It is a good book.
I was hoping to talk to him about it, but we'll do that next week, I suppose. I've read that book like 5 times, and that's not a thin book.
No.
So you got Summer of Night. You've got
Winter. Go ahead.
Jeffrey Ford's The Shadow Year. You got Boy's Life by Robert R. McCammon. Then at the
Seems to have died.
top, you've got
There he goes.
what's that?
You froze.
You went away for a minute.
Time stopped in Texas for about a minute.
You're like, and then you got, and we all waited.
It was not important, but actually, I probably should use this opportunity to stop the show, because we've been having a lot of internet problems here in my neck of the woods the last couple of days. So we were going to do a hangout on Friday night and we couldn't. So yeah, I said something brilliant. It was basically the answer to life, the universe, and everything. I'm sorry that you guys missed it. But Malcolm, I really, really enjoyed your book, and to everybody listening, please pick it up and read it. It's called And Then I Woke Up by Malcolm Devlin. You're muted. Just have to go down to the bottom left. There you go.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thanks very much for having me.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you. And
Hiding in the corner here.
I'm gonna pick up your other books too. I think you convinced Mr. Rainey here to do the same.
Oh, hell yeah.
And yeah, Mark, it's good to see you again, buddy, and thanks for coming on the show.
Absolutely. Enjoyed it.
Rick, Bridget, Pete, thanks for being here, especially you, Pete. I know how demanding the fishing life can be.
So the reason you see me shift, my legs are cramping up. So I'm trying to stretch them out.
Yeah, no, I understand. At your
Fishes are
age,
dangerous. Fishes are clearly very dangerous.
yeah.
That's what we used to singing lying in bed during these shows.
Yeah. 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 My mom once asked, is Pete okay? He's laying down during the show sometimes. I'm like, yeah, he's always done that.
Everybody's got a gimmick.
At least I have pants on.
Good.
I've got pants on.
There has got to be a story that we can write. Maybe the deep ones get Pete for doing this fishing.
Well, I think we all know how this is all going to end up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it's going to be bad.
We
It's
already
gonna
had a
be bad.
Joe Pova story where the King in Yellow and I think Nyarlathotep went fishing for Pete, right?
Yeah. Published in the eZine.
Oh, right. I remember. Well, the good old days.
Yeah. Suddenly, I'm a lot more concerned for Pete now than I was early in the show.
Well, I'm sorry about
what's going to happen to Pete.
I'm sorry about my little internet lapse there. But other than that, guys, thanks for being on the show. To our guests here and to my panelists, thanks for being here. To my patrons, thank you. I really appreciate it. Without you guys, I'd have to get a real job and not do this. So I do appreciate it. And if you're not a patron, just go to Lovecraft eZine patreon.com or Google it. You get lots of cool stuff. At the very bottom level, you get $5 a month. You get all the Patreon podcasts, and it just goes up from there. Last week we did a Patreon podcast about Michael Shea and his work, and that did that with Laird Barron and John Langan and Sam Ham. I'm surprised Ben didn't want to go to that one, but
I missed that one. We were out that night, and
well, it's recorded.
that made me very
still
sad.
watch it.
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to check it out.
Yeah, he's a very nice guy, Sam. I'm going to see if we can get him on to a Patreon or regular podcast to talk about Batman, because he co-wrote or wrote Batman '89, didn't he?
I think you're right.
Yeah, and he yeah, and I think he was somewhat involved in Batman Returns, but then they went a different direction. But yeah, and he's written and or writing. DC's doing a Batman '89 comic series, and I've read a couple issues so far, and it's really good. Bridget, as I'm reading the comic, I can't stop hearing that Danny Elfman
Yes.
music in my head as I'm reading this Batman '89 comic. So anyway, thanks everybody. I'll go before my internet dies again, and we will see everybody next week. Thank you.
Thank you.